Hello there, and welcome to Stand Up with Pete Dominick Daily, where each and every day I'll interview a very smart person about important issues that matter to you and your family and your country and your planet and your soul and your sanity. Here on Earth One, where we believe in goodness and kindness and thoughtfulness and a certain set of values and morals. I don't know what they are. I don't know how to define them, but I think they'd best be described as human rights, civil rights, one to others as you would have be done to you. Is that the phrase? Either way, I'm happy to have you here, and I've got the great Bill Boyle joining me today. We had a wide-ranging discussion, talked about several different issues from Michael Cohen's testimony to what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine and America and more. I think you're really going to like it, as always, with Bill B. And that conversation starts at about 21 minutes into today's show. But first, it's headlines and sound bites, as it is almost every Monday through Friday, unless I don't have time to get it done. I am a one-man show, and I can't do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Now, if you haven't, you can always raise your subscription, pay more if you want. You are what keeps this podcast pumping out each and every day. It's not ads, it's just your subscriptions, so spread the word. All right, before I get to yesterday's headlines, I want to mention an anniversary, a terrible one from yesterday. Thank you to Ty Randolph, who is my Everyday in Racism in America correspondent, for the reminder that yesterday was the anniversary of the horrific MOVE bombing in Philadelphia. Not something I remember happening, much less remember being taught about at any point, but it was 1985, May 13th, and in the Cobbs Creek neighborhood of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, these United States, the Philadelphia Police Department, during a standoff with a black liberation organization called MOVE, the Philly police dropped two explosive devices, bombs, from a helicopter on the roof of a house occupied by activists. The police department allowed the resulting fire to burn out of control, destroying 61 previously evacuated neighboring homes over 2 city blocks and leaving 250 people homeless. 6 adults and 5 children were killed in the attack, with 1 adult, 1 child surviving. A lawsuit in federal court found that the city used excessive force and violated constitutional protections against unreasonable search and seizure. That was May 13th, 1985, 39 years ago. Thank you for always keeping me honest and reminded of these things, Ty, and anybody else who wants to send them to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, well, of course, the big story yesterday was Michael Cohen's testimony. We've been waiting for it with bated breath for a long time, and it has been covered and overcovered. I was actually on Australian television talking about it yesterday, but of course, Michael Cohen, the disgraced former president, disgraced former lawyer and fixer, is the star witness at his criminal trial yesterday at Trump's. And obviously, Cohen already had his and served time for it. And today, he described for jurors how Trump told him to pay off Stormy Daniels. He said, just do it, okay? Just get it done. The testimonies of Cohen and Daniels are intended to show jurors that Trump falsified business records to cover up a $130,000 payment to Daniels' silence about a sexual encounter. Donald Trump, of course, faces 34 felony counts related to the records and probation, or up to 4 years in prison if convicted. Now, I'm not going to say too much more about it. I might have a couple news clips for you to listen to, but it has been overcovered. I mean, MSNBC is doing wall-to-wall coverage, and all their stars are on panel every night of the trial, and I frankly think it's too much because there are other things happening, and I'm going to mention them to you right now. Here's one. I don't talk much about polls, and I talk a little bit more about this with Boyle in our conversation, but new polls showing that the disgraced former president is leading the current not disgraced president in 5 crucial states. Trump ahead of Biden in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania in a new Times Siena poll, and it's getting a lot of attention, obviously, as a result. Wisconsin, the only battleground state in which Biden is leading. The polls reveal an erosion of support for Biden among black and Hispanic voters who are upset about the economy and Gaza. Since similar polls in November, the stock market has gained 25%, Trump's criminal trial started, and the Biden campaign has unleashed tens of millions of dollars in advertisements. But the New York Times analysis says little indication that these developments have helped Biden. So we'll keep a close close eye on that. Don't panic, but it is something worth watching, those swing states and the polls there. Let's go to Russia, where forces advanced in northeastern Ukraine. A top Ukrainian general said yesterday that Ukrainian troops were confronting a, quote, critical situation in the country's northeast as they battled to repel a Russian offensive. Bill Boyle will tell you that offensives are not working, but Russian troops opened a new line of attack last week in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. They captured at least 9 villages and forced thousands of civilians to flee. The general's bleak assessment echoed that of other Ukrainian officers. Military prospects are dimming. The $61 billion worth of arms from the U.S. approved 3 weeks ago has barely begun to arrive. And in Russia, the president's new defense minister has taken over. Andrei Belousov is expected to provide a new building block toward fighting a long war. Again, I talked with Boyle. We get really in the weeds on that. Now let's come home to the U.S. of A., where power grid reforms could potentially boost solar and wind energy. Yesterday, federal regulators approved the largest changes in more than a decade to how America's electric grids are planned and funded. Experts have warned that there aren't enough high-voltage lines being built, increasing the risk of blackouts and delaying the transition to renewable energy. The new measures require grid operators to plan for needs 20 years in the future. Energy companies have proposed more than 11,000 renewable projects nationwide, but many are in limbo because of insufficient capacity. David Roberts at Volt WTF has better coverage on this than any journalist in the country, in my humble opinion. I'll talk to him soon on the show. Speaking of climate, wildfires in Canada cause air quality warnings in the Midwest, evacuation orders affecting thousands of people in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. In Gaza, the Israeli military intensified its attacks on northern Gaza on Monday, battling a regrouped Hamas in areas it said had cleared and renewing questions over Israeli strategy in the war as the U.S. issued some of its harshest public criticism yet. All right, those are the headlines that I've got for you today. But I saw this article in the Washington Post and just wanted to mention it. It's a sustainability issue. It's a climate solution issue. 3 common recycling myths you should discard. Recycling has been around for decades, and yet many questions about what can and can't go into your bins persist. Part of the problem is that we expect all this to be intuitive, and it's not, said Reed Lifset, a research scholar at the Yale School of Environment. It's actually a complicated system. Number 1, are pizza box recyclable? Yes, they are. The Environmental Protection Agency says you should put them in the bin even if they've been stained with grease. But before you do, make sure you remove any food scraps and flatten the box. Pizza boxes are recyclable. Pizza is not, the agency said in its recycling guidelines. Is all paper recyclable? Another big question. Well, not quite. Paper mills can handle plain paper products and corrugated cardboard boxes, but if the paper's coated, such as glittery or metallic gift wrap, or has additional linings, things that can start to get complicated. Like juice boxes, which are typically made of a combination of paper lined with a thin layer of aluminum and a plastic coating. The paper used for these cartons is usually a high-quality fiber and valuable to paper mills, but facilities need to have equipment to separate the materials. Paper receipts can also be tricky. While ordinary paper receipts are recyclable, oftentimes the slips that come out of debit card machines or newer cash registers are not. How about that? One way to tell what type of paper you have is to scratch it. If a dark line shows up, the receipt is probably printed on paper with BPA or BPS, which is not recyclable. And finally, do recyclables have to be perfectly clean? I've had this argument with my mom before. Hi, Mom. They say, and the experts say in this Washington Post article, they were interviewing a whole bunch of them, the cleaner and drier your recyclables are, the better. But it's generally good enough to get most of the food or liquid out before putting things into the bin. A basic rinse to remove any major food particles is sufficient, but you don't need to get everything squeaky clean, said the spokesperson for Beyond Plastics, Melissa Valiant, an advocacy organization who, of course, I've interviewed here on the show. There's no need to diligently hand wash jars, bottles, or other containers, which can waste water and energy. Susan Collins, the president of the Container Recycling Institute, a nonprofit group, said she soaks certain recyclables to make them easier to rinse out or puts them in the dishwasher. Really? You dishwash your recyclables? I don't know about that. What items can actually get recycled depends on where you are. Of course, if you're not sure about something, don't put it in the recycling bin. Sending your local recycling system recyclables that it can't process can create additional cost and hassle. The tried and true answer is to do a little bit of homework and find out what the local recycling system says is okay. So there you go. There's a little bit of advice, a little bit of myth busting for you, a little something helpful here at the end of headlines. Now let's get to today's sound bites. Let's start by listening to the Vice President of the United States. Yesterday, Kamala Harris was at the annual Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies Legislative Leadership Summit. How was I not booked to give the keynote there? Actor and comedian Jimmy O. Yang was moderating a conversation with the Vice President when she dropped a bit of an F-bomb. How about this?
Breaking barriers does not mean you start on one side of the barrier and you end up on the other side. There's breaking involved. And when you break things, you get cut. And you may bleed. And it is worth it every time. Every time. And so too, especially the young people here, I say to you, when you walk in those rooms, being the only one that looks like you, the only one with your background, you walk in those rooms, chin up, shoulders back. Be it a meeting room, a boardroom, a courtroom, a hearing room. You walk in those rooms knowing that we are all in that room with you, applauding you on, and expecting certain things from you, including that you will not be silent in those rooms. And that we expect that from you because we also expect that you will internalize and know we're there with you. And so your voice can be strong. We have to know that sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open. Sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that fucking door down.
Whoa.
Excuse my language.
We're going to make T-shirts with that saying, kick the fucking door down.
There you go. How about it? That was yesterday during AAN HPI Heritage Month. The Vice President tweeted, "We honor the heroes on whose broad shoulders we stand, including my mother, Dr. Shyamala Gopalan Harris. It is because of her strength and determination that within one generation, I stand before you as Vice President of the United States." So that got a lot of people talking yesterday, of course. And now let's hear what they had to say, different voices and pundits yesterday about Michael Cohen, Trump on trial. Here is MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell, who I love. He took shots at two senators who attended the disgraced former president's hush money trial in Manhattan yesterday, accusing one of being on his phone the entire time, the other of potentially not understanding any of the testimony. Here it is.
J.D. Vance was on his phone the entire time. He wasn't taking in a word of testimony. Tuberville, to his credit, straight ahead, listening, taking it all in as best he can, whatever sense he can make of it. But J.D. Vance, there was really no reason for him to come if he wasn't going to take in anything that was happening.
Lawrence, he tweeted that it's not fair to accuse Donald Trump of falling asleep and, not being with it because he's, as he says, is 39 years old and he was almost falling asleep.
Yeah, there you go. So they're there to corroborate they're there to help with the sleep defense. Okay, I guess that's where the vice presidential auditioning begins. Can you come in the courtroom and please help with the sleep defense?
Always love Lawrence O'Donnell. All right, now the disgraced former president went out and read clips about himself. They were talking about him on Fox News, so we read Fox News anchors and analysts talking about him, and then Fox News covered Trump talking about them. So it's an insidious, vicious circle jerk. But here's our friend Laura Coates talking to former federal judge John Jones, commenting on one Jonathan Turley on Fox News, speculating that the judge ought to direct a verdict. That went out the window this morning. There's plenty of evidence by which the jury could convict, he said. Here's a little bit of that.
What have you made of what Michael Cohen has said this far? Does it ring credible to you?
It rings credible, but I think, Laura, the larger point, and you know this as an attorney, is that when the prosecution rests, they will very quickly, the judge will hear motions. Counsel will engage on that. And, of course, the defense will move for a judgment of acquittal, which they can do. And I read a pundit this morning, Jonathan Turley, speculating that the judge ought to direct a verdict. That went out the window this morning. There's plenty of evidence by which the jury could convict, which, as you know, is the standard on that. So he's been good enough, based on everything that I've seen, to carry the prosecution's case. That is, if the jury believes him.
That is, if the jury believes it. Well, will they believe it? That's the big question that no pundit or analyst knows. And let's head back to MSNBC, which has special coverage every night of the trial. Really overwrought, in my opinion. But this is a fun moment from Rachel Maddow describing today's disgusting narrative.
Now we know. Contrary to Trump's denials that he had sex with Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen testified today that when he asked Donald Trump if anything had happened between him and Stormy Daniels, Trump bragged to Michael Cohen that, yeah, even though he was there at this golf event with Big Ben Roethlisberger, the women there, like Stormy Daniels, they wanted him more than they wanted Big Ben.
That was just worth it to hear her gag at the end. Speaking of gagging, here's Alan Dershowitz on Fox News last night, broadcasting from Earth 2.
So I think there's a good chance of a hung jury. Look, there's some chance of an acquittal if these jurors take their obligations seriously. But this is New York, and as a CNN commentator said, this jury is representative of New York. That's the problem. No. It's like a white jury in Mississippi being representative of white jurors in the South.
And here's also on Earth 2, it's Jonathan Turley, who's a complete and total sellout. Every night on Fox, it's no self-awareness night, says Ron Filipowski.
But what's fascinating is you got someone like Cohen who has only one skill set. He's willing to say most anything for a sponsor.
Yeah, that's exactly what everybody says of Jonathan Turley, so that's why that's funny. And speaking of projection, here's one of Trump's lawyers, Alina Habba, also on Fox News.
He's just in the way. This can turn to you. It could turn to me. It could turn to our children. And that's what they're doing. They're indoctrinating, they're corrupting, and they're throwing out the American Constitution that our country was made on. It is completely out the window. It's so sad to see, Sean. It has to.
Very good. Very good. All right. And I just love Bill Burr sitting down with Bill Maher on Bill Maher's podcast Sunday, basically telling Maher that he has no idea what he's talking about. This is from Club Random, and I love it.
You don't realize that college campuses erupted with the kids demonstrating for Hamas? They are in with the terrorists.
They were for the Palestinians.
Well, it's sort of the same cause. Why, are you?
I'm on the side of the kids.
Yeah, that's easy to say. You know, no one wants to see kids dead. This is a war.
That was very brave of you to say that.
This is a war. No, I'm the one who was actually brave on this.
Pat yourself on the back.
It's easy to say I'm for the kids. Who's not for the kids?
Well,
it comes down to real hard-nosed decisions. Like a country.
Stop talking like you're a general.
A country got attacked. Israel got attacked.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to go back. I'm just sitting there going like, how do I look at
We're the only country in the world that they get attacked, and then as soon as they counterattack, it's like, well, we got to stop this shit now. Don't attack them. There's a very simple solution to all this problem in the Middle East. Stop attacking Israel.
Hey, you
Stop
just solved
attacking
it.
Israel.
You just solved it.
I actually
did.
There you
go. That's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right.
We don't need to get onto that.
Let's go to Russia and the Ukraine. How do you solve that one, Bill? Let me hear your hard-nosed decision about that. Well, let me ask you a question. How is war still legal? With all this shit that's been canceled.
Legal.
Why is that still fucking legal?
Would you like a real answer to that? Because for something to be illegal, you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And you can't enforce against war, or else you have to go to war with the country that's going to war. And we don't want to go to war with Russia over Ukraine. What would be the sense of making it illegal? Oh, that's really going to stop Putin. No. To stop people from going to war, you have to also put boots.
You can't sit down and talk it out. Why can't Putin do a podcast with the head guy? Like, you just solved the Middle East on a podcast. Why can't they solve what they're doing on a podcast?
This is why this is not your thing.
Make some hard-nosed decisions.
It's
not your thing. It's what you.
It is my thing.
It isn't your thing.
This is not your thing.
You're like that guy that has a fantasy football team and thinks he's a fucking GM.
No.
That's exactly what it is. Like, why am I fucking listening to you like you've done something? What have you done in Washington? Nothing.
It's amazing. Absolutely love my old friend, Bill Burr. So good. We used to be really, really close. I used to love hanging out with Bill back in the day, and I love that. So there you go. That is the last sound clip I've got for you. Hope you appreciated all of that, and let me know, as always, what I should be reading in terms of headlines. You send me some news stories, but never enough. I'm trying to jump into Discord more, where I know you guys are sharing stuff, so always send it to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Well, let's get to Bill Boyle, who is my guest today. Always love talking to him. He's a longtime listener, of course. He used to call the old show, and he's become one of your favorite guests and analysts here on the new show, on the podcast. For years, I've been having him on, and most of you really love his analysis, and none of us can figure out how he knows so much. But I think the fairest thing to say is he's well read. He spends a lot of time reading and absorbing in a way. I feel like his comprehension rate is so much higher than many of us, certainly than mine is, in what he reads and what he hears, and he's always paying close attention. Today, we talked about his take on the Michael Cohen testimony on day one. He's reading, following a lot of smart people on that, was able to give us his regurgitation of their legal analysis with his spin, as always. We talked also about the state of the presidential campaign for just a little bit. Talked about that story in Virginia where they reinstated Confederate school names and got deep in the weeds in Civil War history, which is always fascinating, and also looked at what's happening in Israel and Ukraine, I should say Gaza, well, and Israel and Ukraine, Russia, and really got in the weeds on the latter. So I think you're going to like it if you like this stuff. I always love talking to Bill. I always learn a lot. Let's do it right now. Follow him on Twitter at BillB in DC. He's one of us. You'll see him at our Hangouts often on Thursday night, Holden Court. We can always argue with him there or anywhere else. He's open to it all. Let's do it. Bill Boyle right now. There he is. Bill Boyle, Bill B in DC, back. Thank you very much for joining me. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Pete. How are you?
Good. There's a lot to talk about. We got several topics I want to ask you about. First of all, it was day one of Michael Cohen's testimony in Manhattan, and I just wanted to see how closely you're paying attention to that and why, if anything, you think it matters here as we talk on that day one of his testimony.
So I don't follow it too closely, but there's a guy on Twitter called Jose Pagliari, who's a journalist, and he just does this unrolled thread the entire day during the court. And every once in a while I check that. And it's full of really excellent legal judgments and a lot of great observations. And what really struck me watching it today was that apparently Trump was sitting there with a stack of papers in front of him for a lot of the day, just kind of staring, falling asleep, waking up, staring at the stack of paper. Like, and somebody, is it Olivia Nuzzi maybe, described Trump one time as, when he's not on camera and he's not in control of things, he's like a doll with it. I'm like a puppet with its strings cut. And today, Trump really, the descriptions, he really sounded like that guy, you know, where he just is he's not in control. He knows this is no good for him. And apparently Cohen's testimony was real bad. A former state judge was sitting in the court, and a reporter sitting next to him said, "What do you think of Cohen's testimony?" And the state judge said, "He's killing them."
Real bad testimony mean it's real bad for Trump's case for Donald Trump.
Exactly, because it's just Cohen is demonstrating very clearly with lots of documentation to back it up that Trump expressly wanted this to be put to bed until after the election either way.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the case. I mean, you know, is it possible that they get one wild-ass, you know, guy trying to nullify it on the jury? Sure. Is it likely? Not really at this point. So this case, I think, is going to be put to bed this summer and in June probably. And then we're really going to see what they decide, what the judge hits Trump with, and how it affects the election. I'm not happy with the polls I see, but I don't take them nearly as seriously as a lot of people do yet. I'm not sure how well they're measuring things. But I'm pretty convinced that a felony conviction in New York is going to hurt Trump in the suburbs pretty much nationally. He's still losing 15, 20, 25% of GOP voters to Nikki Haley, and they vote after she quit the race. So, yes, Biden has problems, but Trump is really got some really serious problems, too. And I think that this will exacerbate those problems in the end, in the election in November.
Yeah, I think you obviously make a lot of good points there. The only thing I'd add to the Cohen thing, I think it's interesting you mentioned potentially one juror hanging it up. I mean, I'd be surprised given the jury selection process, given the demographics of Manhattan. And I just wanted to make a point that 5 of the jurors are women. And I think, I don't want to generalize about what women think when I'm talking to another man or ever, but man, I'm just going to go ahead and say they're not going to love what they're hearing coming out about Donald Trump simply cheating on his wife with a porn star while she just given birth or was pregnant or something like that, not even using a condom, like all those details, they don't necessarily make him guilty in the payment and for the reasons that it's against the law, but they're going to more likely believe corroborated evidence like we heard today and the witnesses that are saying
it speaks to his character or complete lack thereof. And it's hard to see how, for not just the women, but the men in that jury, you just sit there and look at this guy and think, man, what a fucking scumbag.
So let me ask you about just the fact that these other trials, it looks like, are not going to be argued. We're not going to hear the other cases. The Georgia case is all messed up, given what happened.
Not before November.
Not before November, right. Well, if he somehow wins re-election, maybe never, but... What is your take on the fact that they've kicked the can down the road for lack of a whole bunch of nuance and detail about each of these 3 cases and why we aren't going to hear them before Election Day?
So I'm going to say something that a lot of people who hate Trump are not going to love. But I think that it demonstrates to a great degree the rule of law, that it would be bad, actually, if we had a system that said we really don't like this Paul, so we're just going to blow off all the rules and bring him to court right away. Now, part of me would love that because I think he's a danger to the republic. But, you know, there is a thing that happens. John Gann's my favorite guy, talks about this all the time, that Democratic republics start to get in trouble when they start breaking their own rules in order to fight off what they see as an authoritarian threat. And, you know, Weimar Germany did this often where I'm wearing a shirt, by the way. This shirt, it's got 3 arrows pointing down in a circle for those who are just listening. And it was the shirt of the Social Democratic militias that were street fighters against the Nazis in the 1930s.
That's very impressive. I thought it was a Third Eye Blind shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sadly, no. They have their own militia, which I'm not tough enough to join. But, you know, so the Weimar Republic beat the crap out of people and really had its own bully boys on the streets kicking people who were their enemies. And that all of this is to say that, yes, it sucks. Yes, I wish that particularly in Florida, we didn't have a judge who was so in the tank for Trump, she was throwing the case for him. But the rules are the rules. They need to be followed. If we have a problem, it's that rich people can have the resources to really stretch things out. That really sucks. And we're in a bad, unprecedented situation. But it's better that we follow the rules than if we don't.
I understand.
We'll be happier we did.
I understand that as it goes for the rule of law and courts. I wonder, however, if you would change your take to some extent if the scenario were that to fight fascism, to beat authoritarianism, we have to bend our own rules and principles in the resistance. I'm not talking about court of law, not talking about breaking the law. I'm talking about maybe I look the other way if my guy did or said this or that. Any number of things that you could do to beat the fascists back, because we're never fighting the same game. That's what I'm finding here with my Board of Election campaign. What they do to us, we can't beat it. Right. I feel like a lot of Democrats, liberals, and progressives complain all the time. Why can't we play dirty? Why can't we do what they do? I sometimes want to find some nuance in between that just has us not necessarily always following the rules to a T, because otherwise what they're doing in our case is they're making up things that we didn't say. How do you react to that? Too late. It's out. It's posted on Facebook. It's said on TV. How do you react to that? And I'm not saying that we too should say that they said things they didn't say. I'm saying we've got to have maybe sometimes a different set of rules to beat the fascists, to beat the authoritarians, or we could become ruled by them and we are all living in Gilead.
So I would say this. Look at the two most successful, what were the more revolutionaries in the world that you can think of? Who are the two people with the minimum amount of force that created the most
Gandhi
change.
and King?
Martin Luther King and Gandhi.
I hear you, but
they had the entire, forget about the right. They had everybody just to the right of them. They had 80% of society against them for most of their careers. They won because they refused to play that game. Now you can fight, you can get people out to vote, you can continue to speak the truth, and I think that needs to happen. If you start becoming your enemy, then what's the point?
I know, but I'm not saying become. Is there something between becoming your enemy? And I'm not suggesting that. And by the way, I'm not saying I condone this. I'm not saying that. I'm saying honestly that it's challenging when you're me and when you're us in our school board fight, our organized group of parents. When we're fighting with these people and the tactics they're using, we can't and never would use. But is there anything that we could possibly do to beat them in this game where they're not fighting with good faith, within, frankly, the rule of law?
So the thing that you do is you get people out to vote. That's
we're doing that. We're turning out and we're making calls. We're knocking on doors.
How did you do in the last election?
We won. We've won because we organized, but I worry that we're not as.
So I would say, Pete, that those people who are doing what the MAGA people do, that wild-eyed accusations and, just being nasty and being hysterical and everything else, at this particular moment, it's working pretty well on paper. Or I shouldn't say that. It's working pretty well digitally is a better way to put it. It's working pretty well in media. It gets them all kinds of clicks and everything else. But they're continually losing elections and they're continually seeing their base shrink. So, yes, I see that, I see the temptation. I get it. You want to kick their ass because they're awful and they're assholes. But at the same time, I'll give you a great example. And this is our national thing. My buddies that are conservatives who are sort of anti-Trumpers worked in politics a long time. They were just we were sitting around Friday or two ago, and they were looking at the Senate races that are coming up this fall. And they're like, the Republicans are going to lose at least 4 Senate seats. They should win.
Okay.
Yes. They're probably not going to beat Tester. Okay.
Montana.
They're probably, Kari Lake is almost very highly likely to lose in
Ruben Gallego in Arizona.
To Gallego. What were the other 4? They had like 4 or 5. And it was just wild.
Ohio, Sherrod Brown.
Oh, Sherrod Brown. They think Sherrod Brown pulls it out.
But that's close. We haven't won anything in Ohio in a while, it feels like, outside of the abortion referendum.
Well, so the abortion referendum is a big deal, but the guy who won, because he's a MAGA guy, is like this used car salesman scumbag with all kinds of skeletons pouring out of his closet. And so these guys are saying, like, you never want to be like the Republicans because we suck because people in our party are so crazy and so nuts. We give up power because we are too hard for regular people to swallow in most places. And that's really the answer to your question. You don't want to be them because they lose elections over time. And they lose more and more.
The Senate seats, we mentioned Arizona and we mentioned Ohio, but the other ones are Nevada, Sam Brown versus Jackie Rosen. In Pennsylvania, David McCormick versus Bob Casey. You mentioned Montana.
Casey's going to kill him.
And in Wisconsin, it's Tammy Baldwin against.
Who's also going to win. Yeah.
So,
and as these guys see it, those are 4 seats that should be at least highly competitive, and really only a couple are going to be competitive.
And why did you bring up the Senate races here? Sorry.
Because the point is that the Republicans get to do all the screaming and yelling, and they say all kinds of wild shit, and they get their people all hyped up, and in the end, it hurts them. It actively hurts them because they radicalizes their base, and then their base won't vote for anyone else who isn't as radical as they are. And they don't have the Senate right now because they've been doing this for
That's a great point. Mitch McConnell has been pissed over and over that they nominated for the last 10 years that so many of the candidates they nominated were too extreme. And had they nominated somebody who didn't think Jesus was born with an M60, they might have actually got, or that women shouldn't just close their legs. That was one of the, I think in Indiana, they nominated some guy that, and he lost for that reason.
Remember the witch in Delaware?
The witch. Yep. There's a whole bunch of them. In Arizona, the guy, that was real creepy last time around. Anyway, those are really interesting points. Let's talk about just real quick, your thoughts on the current state of the race. We don't want to spend a lot of time on it. It's still far out, but a lot of these polls, specifically in swing states, are the ones that matter to me, are disconcerting. And I just heard an interview with a young man, a Gen Z guy who runs a millennial polling and trend. It was a New York Times, I think, that podcast did it. Or no, it was a different. Doesn't matter. The New Yorker, I think. And I'm going to try to get him on myself. But like young folks turn out and where they're standing on this election, young people being polled, I think 18 to 29. It's very close between Biden and Trump. Hard to believe. Obviously, it's men, it's white men, it skews there, and they've been Roganized, which is one of the reasons he said that young men especially might be more likely to vote Republican or Trump. But what are your thoughts on the state of the race? And feel free to shit on anything I just said.
So I would just say this. I am not deeply convinced by any of the polls I'm seeing. I'm obviously happier with polls that show Biden up, but when you see a lot of these polls, both pro and con, you see a lot of really weird results in the crosstabs. And you should never be a crosstab guy too much, right? But when you see
you do become one, it gets scary because you can find some intersection between this race or age or what job or income and be like, oh boy, that doesn't look good. That's how I felt today.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, you just look at it to judge the poll, not the result of the poll. Right. And when I see like the CNN New York Times poll, somebody showed today that it has Biden only getting 54% of the vote in Philly. That defies belief. Right. I think it would be an 18-point drop for Biden from the last election in Philly. Maybe that's by some weird reason. That's how people feel today. But say even if that's true, today is not November 1st. Today is how do I feel about the president? I'm pissed off about inflation. I'm whatever, this, that. It's a referendum on Biden only at this point. When you see it in September, October, November, then it's really a question of, do I want Trump back in? Do I want Biden back in? Do I love Biden? No, but Jesus, look at this guy, who is now a convicted felon, by the way. So I just think I don't get too bent out of shape. I would love to see every poll with Biden up by 20, but it's too early. And every really good pollster that you've ever heard of says that. Charlie Cook, Amy Walter, Larry Sabato, Brownstein, all these guys are like, well, everybody relax. Yes, does it look good? No, it doesn't. But you know what? It looked terrible for Trump himself in 2016 at this point. The idea that if Biden's down by 4 or 5 now, oh my God, it's over and that's it. We're not even close. I mean, 3 months from now, that's when the pedal starts to hit the metal. When we're in August, that's when we really know where it's going to be. And until then, I have to tell you, I've given quite a bit of money to Biden for this cycle. I will probably max out, and I think everybody should. If you're worried about it, give them fucking money. Take your wallet out. Put your money where your mouth is. Or if you don't have the money, go out and organize, go out and volunteer, and go out and phone bank. Yeah, all those things for sure. There is no other choice. We've all got to jump on the phones and make swing state calls, whatever you want to focus. I think probably direct your energy, money, and focus on those states. However, I know you make your donations directly to Joe Biden. You actually hand him a box of cash that somebody left in a garage. I wrap it around a rock and I throw it over the fence of the White House. I love that your throwing motion, by the way, was like a weird Kareem Abdul-Jabbar hook and not just... Oh, yeah, skyhook. Come on, baby. But you're throwing money. You don't just fling it. You got to... Fair enough. That's a good point. But for people who don't have your connections, where do you donate directly to, like, the Biden campaign or... Yeah. Just go straight go to their website. Go to ActBlue. Okay. And put your info in and you can send the money directly to the website. I would say that, you do not give a penny to any fucking long shot Democratic Senate candidate out there. I will personally come to your house and punch you in the nose if you do. Oh, geez. Wow. Somebody running against the, South Dakota Republican senator. Stop it, everyone. We did this last cycle. We gave $21 million to the woman who ran against McConnell in Kentucky, and every single dollar of that was far better spent somewhere else. Give your money to the swing state races or to the presidential race, and that's it, and no other bullshit. Several other stories I wanted to ask for your thoughts and take on, especially this one that was very disturbing, saw over the weekend. Of course, Ty sends this to me because he is our This Week in Racism correspondent here on the show. Shout out to Ty Randolph. But the Shenandoah County School Board in Virginia restored the names of Confederate generals.
generals. It restored them to 2 local schools. The schools were named after Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and Turner Ashby. And this is 4 years after the names were changed as a result and in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And a lot of people woke up to our horrible racist past. And there was a movement, obviously, far too late. What do you make of the fact that white supremacy is so hard to kill? The backlash seems to be ever present. And in this state, they went as far as restoring. It wasn't enough to be complaining that we took down Confederates that should have been taken down 150 years ago. It was bring them back, Boyle. Bring them back.
So just like pretty much every other Confederate monument or commemoration there is, it's a modern invention. It's not something that was happening in 1870 or 1880. This is white people's resentment, their racial resentment, their regional resentment, coming out in toxic and shitty ways. And by the way, I've been there. I know exactly where that is. It's just west of me. And, you get out there driving around and, I went to I don't know if I should be this clear. I went to the museum for a certain famous 1970s and 80s TV show surrounding a car. And it's one of the only few times in my life with my wife and kid where I could feel the vibe that we were being looked at like as an interracial couple.
You went to the Dukes of Hazzard Museum with your Vietnamese wife?
That is quite possibly exactly what I meant.
Is it the Knight Rider Museum? Why is that significant to this?
And I should point out, by the way, the guy who owns it walked up to us and was an absolutely nice guy. But there
was
were other
I'm Roscoe Pico's right. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
He saw me as clearly fitting the archetype of fat, middle-aged, white American. But he was cool, but there were people there that were eyeballing us in a unfriendly way. And you don't see that very much until you get over the Blue Ridge. And it's a little weird out there. There's a lot of resentment for rich people from DC coming out there to buy houses and be tourists, all that stuff. And
black people.
I would just say that, when you put a couple of people who really were fucking losers, I mean, they lost. Stonewall Jackson got shot by his own men. Big whoopsie daisy there.
Really?
Robert E. Lee was fighting a Napoleonic War in the Industrial Age and got his ass whooped by a guy who was working in his father's hardware store when the war started. That would be Grant. I don't know if you know that Grant was working as a clerk in his father's hardware store. That's who kicked the shit out of Robert E. Lee. And as far as Ashby, who gives a shit? He got shot down like a dog at some point at the end of the war, I think, too. So if these guys want to, justify their lives by supporting slaveholding losers, they can knock themselves out. I honestly think 10 years from now, those schools won't be named with their name now again, and no one will give a shit.
Okay, that's a really interesting and historical take. I mean, I think Ulysses Grant, before he was a shopkeeper, he probably didn't go to West Point? Wasn't he a military veteran? You made it seem like he had no experience before he kicked the shit out of the Confederates.
So Ulysses S. Grant basically failed at everything in life after West Point and until the Civil War. He fought in the Mexican-American War, where he was mentioned in dispatches basically and had a good war, but he actually thought that the war against Mexico was a crime. But he fulfilled his oath and went and fought anyway. And he came back and he was out in California where he became a drunk and got quietly booted from the army. And then he was a woodcutter. He had a farm that he ran that failed. When he got back, by the way, from the West Coast, they landed in New York. That's where they dropped him off. And he had no money. And he ran into a fellow Army officer who lent him $21 to get him back home to Ohio. That Army officer later on was the commander of, the fort on the Mississippi River. That was the foundation of Ulysses S. Grant's No Surrender Pledge. And I'm blanking on the name, which is absolutely hilarious given how much of a history nerd I am.
That is Fort Henry. Donelson.
Not Henry and Donelson, but the big one right down the river from that. Anyway, Ulysses S. Grant forced the guy to surrender unconditionally who had lent him $21 when he needed it more than anything in his life. So Grant was a no bullshit, tough, amazing guy. And he came basically descended to nothing and rose to the heights. And I'm going to tell you the name of that.
It's not Fort Donelson?
That was right before that. It was, hold on.
I'm looking it up too. For folks listening, I didn't guess that. And I do want to read
Donelson's right before that.
Grant's memoirs, as well as that book I think that you love that was recently written about Grant by a very respected author. They both look really good.
Vicksburg. I was blanking on Vicksburg.
And I was looking at Ron Chernow's book, but yeah, Vicksburg. Okay.
And Chernow's book is superb. And Chernow brings up, by the way, an interesting Grant anecdote. When he had that farm that was failing with his wife and kids, his father-in-law gave him, I think, 3 slaves to help him at the farm. And Grant, who was not politically against slavery yet, this is still 1850s, he couldn't do it. He set him free. And to his father-in-law's enormous consternation. It would be like back then in terms of you give somebody a piece of real estate and they go, I'm not cool with this morally, so I'm giving it away. Grant said, I'm not cool with not paying 3 people to be slaves to work for me. And so he emancipated them. So Grant is this incredibly interesting and complex character. And, you look at somebody like Lee and, Lee was the same thing, never changed, there's no growth in Lee. Lee is just the same thing at the end of the war as he was at the beginning, and he probably never quite understood what happened to him.
That seems unfair even to Robert E. Lee, but speaking of...
No, I think it's pretty accurate. I don't think Lee, by the way, was this incredible villain, but he literally just did not understand the war, which Grant understood strategically and operationally what was going on in a way that Lee just never wrapped his head around.
Well, you are a war historian and you're paying attention to present day war. So let's segue into the 2 conflicts that I wanted to talk with you about. Just specifically before we get to Russia, Ukraine, which you have a lot to say about, I know, as always, just on Gaza, Israel, and what you're seeing there. You're obviously got a pretty good take and grip on the domestic politics of it to a certain extent. I saw that you retweeted this guy who wrote, the U.S. and its allies fucking shot down a massive Iranian missile and drone barrage against Israel in the single most successful instance of missile defense in human history. And less than a month later, Ben-Gvir is tweeting that Joe Biden loves Hamas. Incredible pieces of shit. How would you characterize or help us understand in American politics these right-wing Israeli leaders, from Netanyahu to Ben-Gvir to many others in the cabinet and leadership, which is dominated by these types in Israel? Unfortunately, I think it's fair to say. How would you characterize these guys? And they're taking so much from the U.S. in terms of funding and obviously negotiations and rhetoric, and you would think it's somehow on good faith, or it used to be. And then they turn around and bite the hand that feeds them in all of the different ways. But how would you characterize all of that?
I mean, I think it's exactly as you said. I mean, there's just now this expectation that they're the dog and we're the tail. And I'm sorry, fuck you. You need us. We don't need you. I'm a long-term supporter in most of my life of Israel, and I still, to a certain degree, am a supporter of Israel. But the idea that you can basically, Netanyahu has intervened in American politics, presidential politics. He has insulted the president of the United States. He doesn't listen when the United States says, oh, we're giving you $14 billion.
He's insulted multiple. He insulted Biden, but let's not forget his insults to Obama. He kissed Trump's ass. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but
forget about that. James Baker under Reagan, and Bush, when he was Secretary of State, Bibi Netanyahu was the foreign minister of Israel, and he was banned from the State Department grounds by James Baker. The Reagan people hated Bibi's guts.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so people sort of make this out to be like, wow, Biden has this animus towards Jews or Bibi or whatever. No, that's bullshit. The Bibi wing of Israeli politics treats the U.S. like we're their arms depot and their banker, and they have no responsibility towards us. And I'm sorry, fuck you. We're giving you help. We have a say. And we more should have a say, by the way, given that 2/3 of Israelis agree with fucking Biden. 60-some-odd% of Israelis don't want them to go into Rafah. So Biden
specifically
is actually
on the question about the continuing the war in the South. That's the question that
Rafah. And here is sort of why. The Israelis have already lost control of many of the places they quote unquote conquered already. They're not leaving security forces in place after they go through and Mariupol parts of Gaza. And so what happens once they're gone? All the infrastructure is destroyed. Their food is being trickled in with a straw. And guess who takes over immediately? Of course, the armed men that are around, meaning Hamas.
Right.
So Israel is just doing this strategy where they're knocking a ton of shit down. They're immiserating everybody. They're recruiting for Hamas. And they're not fixing their problem. Hamas is going to be there and is already back in the places Israel destroyed already. So the idea of doing Rafah, frankly, from a strategic point of view, operational point of view, it doesn't accomplish anything. It just hurts your relations with the U.S. The U.S. looks at you and says, we're giving you aid. Well, we expect to get some sort of conclusion out of this. We expect to get, you to get at a point where there's equilibrium here. You can't just roll over it, smash it all, and then just pretend it doesn't exist. It's going to be a running sore on your border for eternity, and you're destroying any chance of Middle East peace, whatever tiny bit was left. So the U.S. is being like really sagacious. God, I can't speak today. They're being wise. Let's do that.
That's all right. I don't know what that word means anyway, so I'm glad you switched.
The U.S. is being wise. The White House is being wise. They're saying, look, just blowing shit up may make you feel better this week, but it doesn't solve your Hamas problem, even in the medium term, even in the short term. So it really grosses me out when people forget about even, the Israeli right-wingers like Gvir. It grosses me out when you see American politicians immediately jump on and go, oh, Biden is betraying Israel. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, guys. I am a New Jersey guy, Irish Catholic, Judaism 2.0. I grew up in Jersey. My father's a Yiddisher. I'm saying this as a friend of the tribe, if you vote for Trump because Biden slowed down one offensive military program, that was a very small subset of all of the help we've been giving you. If you vote for Trump, do not fucking come to me when the fascism hurts you later, because I will have no sympathy.
It's the second threat you've levied against.
I'm feeling it tonight, right? Because I'm wearing this German Democratic Socialist, militia shirt. So
I get. So you made the point about how they routed, or I think that you used Mariupol, a city in Ukraine, as a verb.
I said they Mariupol things. Yes. Yeah,
about how Israel flattened northern Gaza and many parts of Gaza. You mentioned that. And you say they've already kind of recuperated, not recuperated, but like reorganized. The point being that I'm trying to make is I get so tired and exhausted when I hear American politicians, foreign policy analysts, and even quote unquote experts talking about eradicating Al-Qaeda, destroying and beating the terrorists, killing them all, whatever it might be. Because we never do, because it's an idea, it's an ideology, number one. It's so insulting to anybody who's watched any of these conflicts play out through history. But in this case, what they're doing is they're talking about, I heard Lindsey Graham and other Americans, obviously Israeli leaders are saying that they're going to get rid of Hamas. They're not going to get rid of Hamas. It's a ridiculous thing to say. But the question that is asked by a good anchor, reporter, analyst, whatever is, to any of these, especially pro-Israel war leaders and cheerleaders, is what happens next? What happens after? This, of course, was asked of the Bush administration about Iraq. It should be asked of any leaders. What happens next? I'm sure you're going to cite all kinds of different World War II history, maybe even one history. But the point is, they're not doing anything about happening next. This is all political. Destroying the violence, everything. It's to keep Bibi out of jail. It's political. There is no long game.
That's right.
There's no national security of Israel and Israelis, if you care about them, there is no long game.
That's right. There is no long game. Well, there's one long game. The one long game that's going on here is that Bibi knows if the war's over, or if he ends the war, that his partners in his coalition will leave, and they will all get obliterated in the next Israeli election. So just like the British government's doing the same thing under the Tories, they don't give a shit about the fate of the country, the long-term best interests of most of the people. They don't care at all. They could care less in the same way Trump does not, by the way. They care about themselves and about, in Trump and Bibi's case, staying out of jail. They don't want to go to prison. That's it. And they will sink to any level. They will engage in all kinds of demagoguing, anything they possibly can, because in the end, it's about them, and that's it. So again, anyone who tries to tell you that like Biden is hurting Israel, Biden's trying to save Israel. He's also, by the way, trying to save as many Palestinians as he can. And that means that he's going to look like shit to everybody because no one wants to see the nuance of that. They want like the Green Lantern president to come in. And if you're Palestinian, you want him to destroy the Israelis. If you're Israeli, you want him to destroy the Palestinians. And no one realizes that that's not the path to any world you'd ever want to be in. So.
All right. Well, let me ask you finally about what the hell's happening in Ukraine. Let me throw some headlines out. Of course, last week, Vladimir Putin was reelected for another 6-year term. We could talk about that. But here are the headlines. CNN. Putin replaces Russia's defense minister with a civilian as Ukraine war rages and defense spending spirals. Here's another headline. Ukraine says 30,000 Russian soldiers attacking amid border offensive in Kharkiv region. Another headline. Russia intensifies attacks on Ukraine's Kharkiv region. What headlines, what stories, what narratives are you following that we really should know about what's happening there? Because it feels like that we're mostly paying attention to whether or not the United States Congress would support Ukraine in its war against Russia, who is, of course, our enemy, who, of course, interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump get elected and does everything they can to divide us, destroy us in all kinds of asymmetric ways. And obviously, they're, I think, second in nukes. Anyway, what do we need to know about what's happening there, Bill? What are you following? What narratives?
Start small to big. The small thing is that offense is broken in this war. So between drones, satellites, anti-tank missiles, man-pads, all the rest, doing an offensive the way people used to do it is out the window, which means, getting a little bigger, that this is now a war of attrition. And wars of attrition are grinds. It's two rocks grinding against each other, and which rock is going to be thicker and stronger and last longer. Russia has clearly understood that, and they have built up enough manpower, maybe 50,000 extra men, to try to reopen another front in the northeast of Ukraine. The idea being to stretch out Ukraine's forces and force them to make bad choices that they have to give up more terrain to Russia. Interestingly, Russia's offensive is almost entirely foot infantry. They've effectively given up on tank assaults. And what that tells you on multiple levels, it tells you the tanks are vulnerable, too easily seen, etc. It also suggests that the Russians just don't really have the ability to project force into Ukraine. So you're just going to see this grinding of the two rocks against each other all along that front to various intensities, depending on where you are. This is all made worse for the Ukrainians by the fact that we were unable to give them aid for almost 6 months. And so that starved them of shells, it starved them of bullets, it starved them of bulletproof vests, everything. And it made it harder for the Ukrainians to generate more troops because they didn't have the supplies to arm the people that they could train. So Ukraine is now very short of men. Although they do have more in the pipeline coming, they were extraordinarily short of artillery. That now has started to show up. So we're at a point in the war where Russia is looking at the election in November. They are looking at the possibility that, Ukraine's going to have $60 billion. And trust me, every penny of that will be delivered by January 21st of next year, regardless of the election. Biden administration will just shove it over the border on midnight on January 20th of 2025. If they've lost the election, they'll be throwing ammunition over the border up to the last second. So Russia knows it's got to get through 2025. If Russia can get through 2025 with Trump in power, cutting off Ukraine, Russia could get an outright win. Now, an outright win is not what they would have gotten if they had won in 2 weeks back at the beginning of the war. but it's still better than what they're looking at now, because Russia is in a situation where they are running out of the stored fat of the Soviet military. Every month, the quality of Russian armored vehicles and trucks and everything else that you see getting destroyed is getting older, because all the newer stuff's gone. And they're pulling stuff out from 1970, throwing some stuff in it, putting it out in the field. They're losing 1,000 vehicles, armored infantry fighting, armored vehicles a month.
Wow.
They're generating 400 a month, maybe 500 a month. And so over time, the gap gets to the point where now they're just having to live on what they can produce that particular month. And when that happens, Russia's in a lot of trouble. They're not going to be able to really move at all. It'll be like a World War I fight. Now, this is why Putin just did his reorganization of the military. Belousov, I think is the right way to say his name. He's been around a long time. He's deputy prime minister. The fact that he's not a military guy is not a shock. Everybody forgets that Shoigu was not a military guy either until he took over the Ministry of Defense. In the United States, the head of the Department of Defense is almost never a general. The guy who runs that organization, his job is not to be out there saying, send this division that way, send that division this way. His job is to organize the military economically and logistically so that the generals, a guy like Gerasimov, can go and send the military to fight and tell them where to. Belousov is a guy who's been around a long time. He was actually a presidential economic advisor right after a woman named Elvira Nabiullina, I want to say. And she is now the head of the Russian Central Bank. And she is credited as the genius who kept the Russian economy going during this war.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about her. Yeah,
you've seen her glasses, short one. She looks sort of like, our Janet Yellen, but in the Russian octave. And so what's going on right now is that Putin, with all the things, knowing all the things, at least to some degree that I have just mentioned, he's realized he's got to get this machine running to the point where it can continue to generate force on the battlefield for the next 2 years. And that means slaving the economy to war productivity. That's the bet. That's the plan. Turn the whole economy into a warfighting machine. Now, what's really ironic about this, fascinatingly ironic about this, is that that's exactly what the Soviets did in the 1950s and 60s. They said, we're not good at this sort of Western style economics. The Khrushchev thing, okay, but not really working very well. So by the 70s into the 80s, they just turned their entire economy into a productivity machine for kicking out tanks, artillery shells, everything else. The thing is that that's not really a good idea, because sooner or later your productivity, you're making a tank, that's just a dead end, right? You're not selling it. It's not generating more economic activity after you produce it. And so what they're doing is they're making exactly the same mistake the Soviets made in the 1960s and 70s, because they're just turning themselves into a purely war economy. And so, they're going to be a gas station with a militia unit around it, right? It's a gas station with an army. That's it. And so it's a fascinating turn, because it tells you they've effectively given up on winning by their military prowess. That fight's over. They know they're never going to generate a Western military like they had, at least a quasi-Western military like they had at the beginning of the war.
Right.
That's over. This is now just a gut check endurance run to try to get to the end of the line. And the guy Belousov who came in, he's sort of like he's like a gray man. He's an apparatchik. He's kind of a throwback. His economics are more modern. Yep. His economics are, he's the big, what happened in this whole shuffle, by the way, Patrushev was secretary to their National Security Council. He got moved out. We don't know where he's going. Patrushev is an old school Silovik FSB guy, old friend of Putin's, total hardliner lunatic. Something happened there. Maybe he just got too crazy even for Putin, and he got pushed out to pasture somewhere. He might become prime minister of Russia next year. It won't matter. The office doesn't count. He's out. Putin brought Shoigu in to National Security Council basically to act as his doorkeeper. But the guy who came in to run, so Shoigu, by the way, doesn't have connections to the intelligence services. So Shoigu is in a position where he doesn't have the wire pulling ability that Patrushev did. And then you've got Belousov. He comes into Shoigu's job And he, like Shoigu, doesn't have the military background, so he can't pull wires either. It's like Putin is coup-proofing a little bit here.
Coup-proofing. Yeah, I was wondering what you were driving at. I knew you were driving at something. I don't know how the fuck you know any of this, but still fascinating analysis, if accurate.
Well, and right, and this is my perception of it. We'll see what happens. I noticed that some other guys got some goodies. Zolotov, who was head of the Rosguardia under Prigozhin, who was sort of neutral.
Rosguardia? Is that a Guardians of the Galaxy?
It's their state militia, Interior Ministry guys.
Okay.
He was a guy who sat on the sidelines at first with Prigozhin, and then when that all ended, he got Wagner's heavy weapons. He got a bump of some sort. Now, it seems weird to me that a guy who didn't defend Putin when he really needed it gets a bump. Another guy named Dayumin, he got a bump. He's the governor of Tula. He also had some feet in Prigozhin's camp. He then acted as a mediator at the end. He got some extra offices. He got another bump. There's a lot of subterranean things going on here. Not really at the Shoigu level, the Patrushev level, the Belousov level, but underneath that, there's a lot of jockeying going on. And I think that, but I do think that Putin's idea is we're going to turn ourselves into the South Korean economy just for fighting Ukraine. And that's the idea they have. I think it's as equally bullshit as their other ideas, but that is where they're headed. And by the way, Gerasimov is still the commander-in-chief of the Russian military. If he sticks around, that would be really something to see. Because if he sticks around, that means Putin's not willing to go all the way and really try to reform things. And we're going to have to just see where this all goes. But I would say that the people who try to tell you, the Russians are showing the sign of strength and they're showing that they can adapt and everything else, I'm not buying it. I think this is more desperate measures for desperate days. I think from the Ukrainian perspective, the Russians are continuing to move on them a little bit. I think from the Russian perspective, things don't look nearly so fine. I think they are looking at their declining combat power. And if I were them, I would be terrified that something might change against them and they might not be able to survive it.
I haven't talked at all about the Ukrainian political situation and what is happening in Ukraine, but I'm out of time and I want to talk about that with you. But deep in the weeds is where we go, and I love it. I'm really interested in this, and I know a lot of other folks that listen to the program are as well, so I appreciate your analysis. You certainly are obviously always paying attention and able to give us a lot to think about. So very grateful as always, my friend, for you joining me. A lot of good stuff. Parting words, last words, anything I didn't hit, anything you want to add, anything you want to correct, anything you want to say about my face?
Let's leave that last topic aside for now. Okay. I just glad to be here. I appreciate people listening in, and my political prognostications are available in fine Washington area parking garages everywhere.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Have a good night. Cheers.
All right, there you go. Boyle, thank you so much for joining me as always. Bill B in DC on Twitter. You can email him. Actually, let me get his permission to give out his email. I'm sure he doesn't mind. Very easy to reach because he's a community member, a stand-up member, and has been for a long time. You can see him at their Thursday night hangouts, and remember, if you didn't agree or you wanted to say something, add to something he said, bring it up then, because he's usually there on Thursdays. Thank you so much for listening today, for supporting the show, subscribing to it at patreon.com/Pete Dominick, reviewing it on iTunes and Spotify, and of course following on social media and sharing. So many of you bumblebees especially, that's what I call listeners who listen all the way to the end. Maybe you're a bumblebee. Share on social media the show and like it when I post it, and that never goes unnoticed. I really appreciate it. Super grateful. Can't do it without any of you. You're the best. Talk to you tomorrow. Be the change you want to see in the world. John Carroll, always doing just that, taking us out.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. Alright, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on.